Welcome back. Another rapid review from the Gifted Academics team in preparation for the CISSN exam on your way to becoming a certified sports nutritionist. If you want to learn more about our certification prep, the instructors that we have on staff, the resources that we offer, all the links can be found in the show notes, in the bio, in the description, whatever is the correct term these days. All right, today's topic, it's kind of like a triple threat topic here. We're going to talk about three very commonly used terms in the sports nutrition, sports performance world, which would be overtraining, overreaching, and non-functional overreaching. The first time you're going to see these three terms mentioned is actually going to be in chapter 3, but the discussion there is largely around the endocrine response around overtraining, detraining, and then concurrent training. So the first time you'll see overtraining mentioned is going to be in chapter 3, but largely it doesn't matter for what we're going to be talking about. And most of that can be found here in chapter 6. So chapter 6 is entirely about overtraining and overreaching. So we want to do 3 things with this video, or accomplish 3 goals with this video. First, we want to have our definitions down pat. We do not want to miss any questions on the exam that are basic recall of definitions. So we want to define what is functional overreaching, what is non-functional overreaching, and of course, what is overtraining. The second piece of this will be the proposed causes of overtraining and the time frame over which one may arrive at an overreached state in their training or an overtrained state in their training. Most importantly for the exam, we are going to go over some charts from the textbook, which we have cut out for you here in our resources that are provided to all of our students, whether you're self-led or instructor-led. You will get all of our PowerPoints when you sign up. But the most important thing here is going to be signs and symptoms to look out for. So as a coach, as a sports nutritionist, when assessing your athletes or just being there day to day with your athletes, some things that you want to look for: physiological, psychological, immunological, so the immune system, and last but not least would be biochemical. So starting off with definitions here, overreaching is simply an accumulation of training and non-training stress. Remember, the body can't differentiate training stress with non-training stress. So you had a really hard training session, you went home, your dog is sick, and your girlfriend broke up with you. All of that, the body just senses as stress. The next day, you're going to feel overly beat up. It's not just because the training stress, it's the cumulative stress on the body. So overreaching would be an accumulation of those stressors, resulting in, keyword here, short-term performance decrements, meaning that your performance drops off for days up to maybe a week or weeks at the absolute most, and then returns to baseline, or even better, super compensates above that baseline. Overtraining is the accumulation of the same thing, training, non-training stress, that results in long-term performance decrements. This means that your performance will not be the same for months, no matter what you do. Oftentimes, when an athlete reaches an overtrained state, we have to implement some sort of training and nutrition regimen to bring them back up to where they were previously, but that's a process that takes months away from productive training. So overtraining is something that we want to avoid. Even something like non-functional overreaching, the early stages of overtraining would be something we want to avoid. We want to functionally overreach our athletes, short-term drop-off in performance, and then ride that wave back up to a super compensation where we have not only recovered from training, but we have made adaptations so that we are better. We are stronger, we are bigger, we are faster. Whatever our sport demands of us, we can, put out greater outputs within those domains when we have recovered and adapted. Table 6.1 gives you a really, really good description of the stages of overtraining. So first, second, third, and fourth. The first is no effect on performance. This wouldn't be overreaching, overtraining. This really isn't, this is kind of like I just trained maybe a little bit. Performance doesn't even drop off. So it's a very easy training session. The second stage would be the early stages of non-functional or of functional overreaching, where there's probably no effect on performance, maybe a short-term drop-off in performance. What to expect at the neural, muscle, metabolic, cardiovascular, immune, endocrine, and psychological levels. Third, now we're starting to ride that line between functional overreaching and non-functional overreaching. At this point, there probably is a decrease in performance. What you want to measure in your athletes is how long does that performance drop off last? If it is just days and then they're back, or they're even better, ideally, that's functional overreaching. If it takes them months or weeks to recover, you may have non-functionally overreached. If it's a situation where performance drops off for months, you've probably entered stage 4 here, which would be consistent decreased performance drop-offs. So I encourage you guys, know table 6.1, what happens at each of these levels. And then the ISSN is nice enough to actually break this down into charts for you. So we've separated it out on our slides here: signs and symptoms of overtraining, physiological, and performance-based. So, I won't sit here and read these off to you. You've gotten to this point in your career where you're considering pursuing the CISSN exam, meaning that you have a bachelor's degree. I'm, again, confident that you can read. You can go through some of these here, decreased strength, reduced tolerance to loading, decrease in body fat beyond normal levels, elevated basal metabolic rate, shift of the lactate curve, respiration is different, increased frequency of respiration at submaximal intensities, loss of coordination, standard performance metrics that you would want to see improving are actually moving in the opposite direction. There's some nutritional considerations as well. Possibility for or overlapping here would be things like anorexia nervosa, bulimia, eating disorders contributing to that overtraining, as well as amenorrhea, the loss of the menstrual cycle, nausea, GI disturbances. Athletes will report they're nauseous after eating. They have, increased frequency of GI disruption. They're reporting things like diarrhea when they didn't normally have that. These are all commonalities that you would see in overtrained athletes. Again, just things to tuck into the back of your brain so that when an athlete comes to you and they say, I haven't gotten my cycle in a couple months, I've been having nausea around meals, diarrhea, and then you look at their training performance and it's like, well, strength has been on a steady decline, your times are going down, your numbers are getting worse, your performance is dropping off. Boom, some red flags, some sirens should be going off in your head. This is an athlete exhibiting the early signs of overtraining. Dial it back, address that nutritionally, training, or both. On the psychological side, this is actually probably the first thing that you'll notice outside of performance metrics. Sometimes performance metrics just drop off. Like you get weaker for a couple of days, maybe up to a week, and that's completely normal. The psychological signs, I think, are ones that are very easy to identify in your athletes, especially if you're spending a lot of time with your athletes. So apathy around training, your normal motivated athlete doesn't really want to show up, doesn't want to train the way that they usually do, reporting of depression, instability of their emotions. They're not as confident about their training. Maybe they're not looking forward to competition as much, or just a general change in their personality as a whole. If you're noticing those things around your athletes, again, sirens going off. This isn't the athlete that I'm used to. This isn't the athlete that I've known for 2 or 3 years. What's causing these psychological disruptions? And last but not least is going to be immunological and, of course, biochemical. A lot of the biochemical stuff is that it are going to be things that you as a sports nutritionist aren't necessarily going to be measuring, but you may, early signs of overtraining, some psychological stuff, some physiological stuff, you go and send them for a blood panel. You can look over those results. Obviously, those are, the physician first. We want to stay in our scope of practice. But some things over there that I want to highlight first in terms of what may be contributing to a drop-off in performance, it's going to be those iron. Decreased hemoglobin, decreased serum iron, decreased serum ferritin, and lower total iron binding capacity. All of those going to be classic symptoms of anemia, which we often see in our overtrained athletes, especially women. You look down there on the list a little bit more, increased cortisol, decreased testosterone. Again, if you paid attention in the endocrinology chapter, you know that testosterone to cortisol ratio is incredibly important when we look at muscle protein synthesis versus breakdown. Immunological, kind of simple over there. Athletes are getting sick far more frequently, and you can even see some of that on blood work as well in terms of white blood cell irregularities on that. Again, blood work is largely between the athlete and the physician, but it's still something that you can look at and it can confirm your suspicions of, okay, this is an overtrained athlete. We got to adjust training. We got to adjust nutrition accordingly to get them back up to speed. Overreaching and overtraining, very simple. Know your definitions, know your signs and symptoms, and then know those 4 stages from the previous slide, and you will be more than ready for all the questions about these topics on the exam. You'll also be able to educate your friends who maybe are frequently saying, oh, I feel overtrained. You can say, no, you don't have the classic symptoms of overtraining. You can fully nerd out on them. Again, if you want to learn more about our preps for certifications, not just the CISSN, but the CSCS, the CPT, and the TSAC coming soon, click the links down below. You can learn more about our education staff and what we're all about at Gifted Academics. In the meantime, stay gifted, and we'll see you on the next video.